Black Lives Matter and Black Autistic Lives Matter. At Atypical, we've been lucky enough to team up with the Color of Autism Foundation.
We are here to introduce a town hall event discussing the dangers that Black autistic people can face when confronted with law enforcement.
This will be an open, honest, tough conversation with experts and family members on the issues and how we can take action.
And at the forefront of this important conversation is the Color of Autism Foundation. And so now we're going to hand it off to them. Thank you so much to Kim Kaiser and Camille Proctor for the incredible work that you do.
Thank you for having us, and we're honored to be here. I always do this. I'd like to kick it over to Kim because I don't really have much to say. She's like the perfect MC and a perfect representation of what we represent as a nonprofit and what everyone should represent as an outstanding citizen of our community.
Welcome everybody to our town hall event, and I want to give a very special thanks to the Atypical cast. Thank you so much. You are true advocates. Much love for all of us who are autism moms, who are on the spectrum, for everybody who's an ally of both autism and a supporter of Black lives. To begin, we have a few introductions to go around, and I just want to start off by having each and every one of our guests let everyone know your name and whether you're a family member, a self-advocate, or a clinician or supporter of Black autistic lives. And I'm going to start with Renee. Renee, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Renee Watts. I am the sister of Stefan Watts, who in 2012 was murdered by the police.
Hi, everyone. I'm Temple, and I am an advocate, first and foremost. And second, I'm a professor at Duquesne University and a board-certified behavior analyst.
I'm Katina. I'm a licensed clinician whose goal is to educate about mental health. I found out 2 years ago that I'm on the spectrum. Got the diagnosis officially by a psychiatrist. And my goal now is to help parents with children on the spectrum and other people, mental health professionals, to understand what that child may be experiencing, since that was me.
And last but not least, Laverne.
Hi, my name is Laverne Russian. I am Matthew Russian's mom. Matthew was sentenced to 50 years in prison for a non-fatal accident.
We're going to be having this discussion today. We're going to hear some very painful and difficult stories. We're going to hear from professionals in the field. We're going to hear from the advocates such as Ms. Proctor and myself. And we are going to start by giving you a little background. Black Autistic Lives. We're talking about the intersectionality of behaviors, emotional wellness, mental health, and all of the comorbidities that come with autism that provide challenges for anybody's child. So now let's talk about being Black in America. When you are Black in America, there are pre-existing social constructs that have lent themselves to historical trauma. They have lent themselves to social, healthcare, and educational and socioeconomic disparities within our communities. This is a plight that has been in our community for 400 plus years. So I want everybody to imagine the simple fact that it's tough when you're carrying a disability. If you're carrying a disability and you're Black in America, this is even tougher. And the risks to your life when you step out the door, they are real. And for a mother who has either lost her child or to violence or lost her child to incarceration, based upon the fact that the world is not understanding, not only being on the spectrum, they're not understanding being Black. And what I always say is that Black folks in America have never been able to be unapologetically themselves. Never. So that being said, I want to start this conversation with Miss Laverne Russian. Very strong mom, and we're going to hear her story today.
My name is Laverne Russian. I'm married to Demetrius Russian. We have two beautiful children, Matthew, who's 21, and Brianna, who's 18. I am a civil engineer working for the Department of Defense.
Matthew is your son, and he is on the spectrum, correct? So when was he diagnosed?
So Matthew was diagnosed on the spectrum, high functioning, by Dominion Psychiatric. He was 12 years old when he was diagnosed. He was also diagnosed with severe anxiety disorder.
I just want to very quickly kick it over to Katina. I just want to ask you a quick question. If you could just very quickly confirm, is anxiety something that's very common with autism, correct?
Yes, anxiety is because with autism, it's a social, it's a social issue. Mm-hmm. And being socially appropriate, it's not that mostly we can't verbalize exactly what we're feeling. And so you get lost. And so that whole idea of what is someone going to say or do. So I can only imagine the amount of anxiety he probably walked with every day, right, and how to be appropriate in different places.
Right, right. And Dr. Lovelace, in terms of, because you are a behavior specialist, so are there times, when what we call them BCBAs, do they work with individuals who, because of the anxiety, might have certain behaviors that you're able to help? I'm just trying to, find out in terms of your expertise.
Absolutely. So our goal as behavior analysts is to really work on changing the environment. So we don't necessarily like to focus on changing the individual, but how can we change the environment around them to be able to support what they need behaviorally, academically, and in other areas as well.
Okay, all right. So was Matthew ever, when he went through school, how did he do? Was he gainfully employed at any point? Was he in college?
Matthew was a student at Old Dominion University. He worked at Panera. He was actually a mechanical engineering student at Old Dominion University.
Smart like his mother.
Pursuing a bachelor's in engineering.
Yeah, I love that. He got a driver's license.
Yes, correct. He was able.
His independent living skills were pretty.
Yes, as high functioning, correct.
So tell us about the day of the accident. Where was Matthew going?
So the evening of the accident, Matthew was leaving home to go to Panera. It was raining. He wanted to pick up some pastries and of course see his girlfriend that evening.
Right. Okay. So what occurred on his way there? Was there any?
So as he pulled into the Panera parking lot, he got into a small accident in that parking lot.
So he got into a small accident. So what happened after that? What happened when that accident occurred?
When he got into the Panera parking lot and he got into the accident, I guess he started panicking. His anxiety, he started, going through the roof. He started exhibiting breathing. He wasn't able to breathe. He was trying to figure out, exactly what was going on. So he left that Panera parking lot. He left that accident to go down a thoroughfare.
So was he headed back home, or?
We don't know,
Okay.
What he told us, he was trying to calm down.
Katina, this sounds like Matthew might have had a kind of a fight or flight reaction, possibly fueled by the anxiety. Do you
yes, and the big part of that too is the shutting down. You kind of shut down and go into a safe place within yourself. That's, for a better lack of words. So the whole just kind of getting out, the flight or flight for a regular person looks a little different with someone on the spectrum because they shut down. They go within themselves. So he probably had most likely both of that happening. And it's hard to translate to somebody else what's going on with him.
Right, right. So you said that he had a problem breathing and he went to the thoroughfare. So according to how Matthew reported it, what did he do while he was driving down this thoroughfare?
So he started doing his breathing exercises, coping mechanisms to try to calm down, which
he learned in therapy?
Yes, he did. He learned that through his psychologist that he was seeing.
All right. So did he calm himself down? Was he able to pull it together after that?
He was not. He couldn't, like, I believe he couldn't calm down, and that's when he, you know, made the U-turn to come back. He started to figure out, okay, I need to get back to that accident. And that's when he made the U-turn to come back.
Okay. So he made a U-turn to come back. So talk to me about what happened when he made the U-turn.
So he reported that, you know, when he made the U-turn, he lost control of the vehicle. He can't remember what happened to him when he made the U-turn and then when he came out of the U-turn. So in that moment, he reported that he blacked out. He, you know, his report kept just saying, when I came to, I saw lights, when I came to. So from the U-turn to where the collision was, he can't remember.
What happened to the individuals that were in the car that he impacted?
So unfortunately, there was some injuries to the car that he hit. Both the husband and wife sustained injuries. There were non-fatal injuries, and then the car that hit him from behind, you know, sustained no injuries. Matthew's vehicle, all the airbags deployed. His only way out of the vehicle, after he regained, I guess, consciousness, the only way out was through the rear of the vehicle. Once he emerged from the rear of the vehicle, that was his only way out, for him to come out through the rear.
Climbed out of the vehicle.
So, yeah, he had no shoes. He had
Yeah,
no shoes on, nothing, right?
So when he got out of the vehicle, he gets out of the vehicle, and I would imagine that, first of all, somebody must have called an ambulance, and then the person, and then somebody had rear-ended him as well. So what was the discourse that went on when Matthew got out of the vehicle?
Right. So as Matthew emerged from the vehicle, the man that hit Matthew from behind came out of his vehicle and started profoundly, like belligerently, started confronting Matthew, you know, are you effing trying to kill yourself? Are you effing trying to kill yourself? And, you know, Matthew, in the state of mind that he was in, just kind of came to and was like, yeah, I'm trying to kill myself. Yeah, I'm trying to kill myself. But then he was just repeating
that?
Correct, echolalia, and that's, yeah.
So
that's,
who reported to you, I mean, who reported that this is what Matthew was saying at that moment? The witnesses reported this to the police?
Correct, so it was the man that was yelling at Matthew who heard him, and then it was also a bystander who came to aid Matthew, you know, to prevent the other guy from kind of confrontationally.
And they just want to pull in Katina for a minute, and Dr. Lovelace, feel free to jump in here, because this sounds to me like echolalia, or could it possibly have been an echolalia situation? And is echolalia, can that be a result of a crisis?
Well, it can, whenever stress hits, however stress hits, you know, and you're trying to communicate, and however that comes across, because we all not, you know, everyone on the spectrum is not the same. So for him in that particular incident, it could have been just that.
Dr. Lovelace, have you ever at any time worked with or known of BCBAs working with individuals where echolalia might, as a product of anxiety, requires ABA services?
Absolutely. I would say that we see echolalia a lot. We are dealing with individuals who are on the spectrum. And when we see it, often what will happen is you'll hear a shortened part of the phrase, right? He didn't repeat exactly what the person said, but just certain words he grabbed onto and begin to repeat probably a couple of times. So we'll see individuals will say them over and over. And that language is non-functional. They're not saying it for the reason of saying it, right? They're just repeating, and as their body goes through the stress, they only have a couple of ways in which they're trying to get rid of that extra anxiety or that extra stress.
Wow. So tell me, so what happened, Laverne, honey? You okay? Take a minute. What occurred once the ambulance and the police arrived?
There were 17 police officers on site. All the police officers that had any interaction with Matthew said that his speech was slur, his fine motor skills were impacted. The witnesses even testified that even the police officers testified that Matthew did not understand and comprehend what they were asking. I'll give you an example. You know, the police officer said, "Where's your ID? Where's your ID?" And Matthew kept, you know, what, you know, not understanding what they were asking of him.
So it seemed like his motor skills were impaired. He was almost, his speech was impaired. He was just finishing off that almost echolalia-like repetitive pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me that they must have thought he was intoxicated or impaired somehow. So I'm just wondering, did they then ask for a breathalyzer?
So at the scene, yes, they did conduct a sobriety test. Yes, so he passed the sobriety test, but he didn't pass the motor skills, which is, you know, walking on the line. He fell off the line a couple times. He wasn't processing what they were asking him. You know, the hand with the nose thing, he didn't pass that because he wasn't comprehending what they were asking of him.
Right, I understand that is. So again, I'll start with Dr. Lovelace in terms of the behaviors that, and I'll call them, you know, behaviors. The antecedent was clearly the accident, and these behaviors were being exhibited as a result. And how often do you see this in the people that you have worked with, and in with other BCBAs as well?
Absolutely. So one of the things about autism is that it is a sensory, we're dealing with sensory information and the ability to process sensory information for some folks. And so what I'm hearing is it sounds like that Matthew just went into sensory overload, and he had competing forms of sensory information coming into him. And it's hard to be able to process that. It'd be hard for any of us.
What did he report to them?
So he denied the suicidality, and then he basically told them the truth that he was he lost control of his vehicle. I mean, he was telling the truth from the beginning, again and again and again. He lost control of the vehicle.
And is this corroborated with police video?
Yes, yes, body cam videos. Yeah. Almost 12 hours of body cam videos that showed Matthew was consistent with what he reported, which is he lost control of the vehicle.
Mm-hmm. So at the end of this lengthy questioning at the scene of the accident, what was the result? Did he end up being arrested? Was he taken to the precinct?
So after, you know, hours of interrogation at the scene, they took him down to the precinct. Another hour or so interrogation, and finally they charged Matthew with second-degree attempted murder.
It seems like the next step would be to ask for some sort of a mental health assessment or evaluation.
Matthew did disclose to the officers that he had been diagnosed Asperger's, high functioning, so they knew that he was autistic.
Did he receive eval?
I'm sorry?
Did he receive a mental health eval?
He did not receive a mental health evaluation at all.
At all, okay.
He was evaluated by a psychologist.
But that was after?
That was after the arraignment, correct, because
what was the results of that evaluation?
That he was not a flight risk, that he was not a danger to himself or others.
What I have seen is that when people are on the spectrum and in a crisis, and there are some mental health issues going on, the two people that you really want to get some answers to is, first of all, the person trained to assess and evaluate and provide a consult with somebody with autism, and also really important to bring in a BCBA to really do some sort of evaluation, because now you've got them in a crisis. If you're going to put them in a crisis stabilization unit, you want these two professionals to come in. So at any point in time, did they only brought in somebody to do a mental health assessment? Did they bring in anybody who was trained credentialed, licensed to evaluate and assess a person who's on the spectrum?
It never happened.
So in terms of that, those charges, which sound very steep, did those charges stick?
The second degree attempted murder charge was dropped at pretrial because they couldn't produce intent. A week prior to pretrial, they added on 2 aggravated malicious wounding charge, which is 20 years to life each count, and 1 count of a hit and run, which is 10 years.
So they dropped the second degree attempted murder.
Because it was dismissed by the judge.
And
Correct.
then they added these charges you just stated.
Correct. We were horrified. We didn't know what was going on. Our hearts just dropped to know that they would even be able to press these type of charges for an accident, which beyond all of us. We couldn't understand those charges.
And what did Matthew think?
Matthew's life fell apart in his hands. He didn't understand. He was stressed. He wasn't eating. I mean, you could tell that this had just taken everything away from him.
Yeah.
Just to know he could be charged with these charges.
Exactly. So did this go to trial?
No, this never went to trial. A week prior to trial, his attorney decided to go over and figure out a plea bargain with the prosecution.
Really? Wow. So a plea bargain. So Matthew signed something?
So the plea bargain came back as 2 malicious wounding charge. So that it was dropped from the aggravated to malicious wounding. And we still had the hit and run. She told Matthew that if, he signed this, convinced him if he signed the paperwork, that he would come home.
So that was his reason. And Matthew was at the time a legal adult.
Correct.
So he did believe that doing this would help.
Because he signed the plea deal. Matthew was found guilty of the malicious wounding charges and the 1 hit and run, which is total of 50 years and with 40 years suspended. So 10 years to serve.
He has 10 years to serve.
Correct.
And where was he remanded to?
Nottoway Correctional Facility in Burkesville, Virginia.
I just want to make a comment really quick about Nottoway. Nottoway Correctional Center is all-male state prison. It's a level 3 security facility. In this facility, they have inmates serving long-term sentences, including single, multiple, and life sentences. This is not where Matthew belongs. This is not where Matthew belongs. And I don't think any of us, including Laverne, are saying that Matthew didn't make a mistake and have an accident. That could be any one of us. However, the punishment does not really seem to match the crime. So, Laverne, how is Matthew holding up right now? How is his food?
I've taught Matthew to be strong, but he's holding on. Matthew has continuous episodes of anxiety, exhibits decompensation pretty much daily. The facility does not have any air conditioning, so it is 115 degrees any day in those cells, and that adds more to his depression and his living day by day. I don't know how he's doing it.
What impact, because it's clear to me in talking to Laverne and listening to the story and looking at, how Matthew was raised, that Matthew really just received a lot of structure moving forward and a lot of skills that he had adapted to. So skills that maybe somebody else would need your services to help them to adapt to. But do you think that there's going to be a serious decompensation in certain activities of daily living, an increase in other behaviors, perseverative behaviors, increased echolalia?
At a minimum. Let's start with the fact that Matthew's trauma likely started way before he became an unwilling and unnecessary member of the prison industrial complex. It started the moment that he made the mistake of having an accident, the things that some of us probably have done in the past, right?
All do.
And, you know, in my practice, you know, we have had, when a teacher goes on a vacation, weeks of loss. We have had, when a teacher is transferred, a year of loss. And so the loss that Matthew is going through right now, it's tremendous. And I don't want to underplay truly how important the environment is to create a sense of stability, right? A sense of just feeling calm. And I can't imagine anywhere in that cell block or in that prison where he's finding that.
This is at best tragic. But I want to move forward with the hope. Laverne, I know that we have a call to action for Matthew, that there are some steps that everyone on this panel and our wonderful atypical guests and all of the individuals who are listening, that we do have a call to action for Matthew, because we need to advocate for justice. Contact the governor's office, the governor of Virginia, Secretary of the Commonwealth, the Virginia Attorney General, the Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland, and the chair of the Virginia Parole Board. And that will be shared with all of you as a call to action to support Matthew, because Black autistic lives matter. Matthew's life matters. And while our hearts go out to the victims of that accident, and we do wish them well and we wish them healing, this was not an intentional act. But this happens every day to Black people, autistic or not. This is even worse. So that being said, I want to, and thank you, Laverne. And I know you're going to be staying with us, and thank you so much for your strength and your support. And your advocacy on behalf of your son. Every day has to be a struggle. So I want to move over now to Renee Watts. Hi, Renee.
Hi.
How you doing?
I'm okay.
I just want you to talk a little bit about who you are and who your brother was, and some of the things that he liked to do.
I am currently an IT administrator. I've been in IT for several years. I went to Columbia College here in Chicago with a BFA. From there, I stayed in IT, and I support various systems, whether that's networking or help desk support or whatever is needed in our company. As for my little brother, Stefan was someone who was very funny with the family. He didn't talk much around strangers. He had a lot of anxiety when it came to being with strangers. He loved working on computers. He was very interested in computers. He even taught himself how to code, or I could even get my hands on him to teach him. He was teaching himself how to write computer games. Anyone who knows how to code knows that that is a very hard thing to do. So he loved being on his computer, and he loved his family. He went to church every Sunday. He was at Bible study every Wednesday.
Wow. So his life was about, he loved the coding. He loved learning about the computer, self-taught.
Yep.
That is wonderful. What was his diagnosis? We know he was on the spectrum. Did he have any other mental health diagnoses that accompanied the autism?
Well, that was that was debatable throughout the years. Several doctors would say different things, but the only thing that was a constant was that he was diagnosed with Asperger's.
Okay, all right. And were there any challenges early on for your parents with him in terms of sensory overload or anything else that he had experienced?
When Stefan was born, he did have some medical issues. He was at we stayed at the Ronald McDonald House for a year in Chicago to try to work through the medical issues that he had when he was an infant. From there, we started to notice different things where he was missing certain milestones. And we were noticing that he would just be angry when the music was on, or the TV was on, or someone was talking too loud. We weren't really sure what that was at that time, but later on we realized what it was.
Okay. Wow. And so your family got him services, of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And when Stefan was 9 years old, we finally found a doctor, Dr. Scott at Chicago Children's Memorial Hospital, and he took the time to really evaluate Stefan properly, and that's when he was diagnosed.
Oh, wow. So your family worked with the system that was in place to support him. You had some in-home services as well?
Yes, Stefan received in-home therapy. He also received help from a licensed psychologist, at the hospital as well.
Wow. Okay. So he had a lot of supports in place.
Yes, we fought very hard for those support systems. They definitely weren't easy to come by.
Yeah. I was gonna say you awesome advocacy on the part of your parents.
Yeah.
Because you had those things in place. Let's start with going back to some of the reasons why some of the safeguards were in place that led to your father making the call to the precinct, not a 911 call, but the call to the precinct.
Stefan was put on medication for his attention. He was having issues focusing when he was at school. So the doctor put him on this medication. He started to gain weight, and at times he would become aggressive. Not overly aggressive, but mildly aggressive. We spoke with both of his doctors. We also spoke at IEP meetings that he had of our concerns of what was happening. They've tried different medications to see what would work. And they had us, do certain things at the home to make it safe for him and for us.
So had he been, what would occur when he was aggressive, and what would be your response, your family's response?
When he would become aggressive, whether that's just yelling or one incident, he pushed my mother. The doctors told us, not only his home doctor, his doctor at the hospital, at the IEP meetings, at Streamwood Hospital, that when Stefan is in crisis, and he needs to be transported to Streamwood Hospital, he has to come by ambulance, which means that we have to call the police. We cannot call the hospital directly. He cannot come direct. We can't drive him there. Our insurance was Illinois All Kids Insurance, and we have to call the police whenever he is in crisis.
And so you had done that before?
Yes.
Okay. And what would happen when the police came to transport him, which is very common to be transported to a crisis stabilization unit, correct, Katina, to tweak meds, because sometimes if you lean more on into the mental health system as opposed to the disability system,
it's going to make it safe. Supposed to be a safer way to get there.
Yeah, it's a safer way to get there, but the problem is that I think sometimes people don't understand that you are on the spectrum.
Oh.
And you're exhibiting these behaviors.
Yeah.
That might be indicative of an antecedent.
Definitely.
Or something else. Dr. Lovelace, have you seen situations where individuals become agitated and aggressive based upon something that happened before or something that was going on physiologically or something going on in their environment?
Any antecedent can cause a change in behavior, whether it's physiological, whether it's something in the environment. And so that's absolutely something that happens.
That's it. And it's my understanding it's really important for clinicians and for BCBAs, or the psychologists and neurologists, to really be aware of some of those things that are going on with individuals. It really is a definition of person-centered care, like what happened before this happened, right?
Mhm.
So they seem to have some wraparound kind of services going on for your family. You had some intensive in-home services being done by a clinician, and you had clinicians you had connected with at the hospital. You seem to be establishing some sort of a rapport with the police as well, because they had done this a few times.
Yes. So when we first had to start calling the police for Stefan to be transported, they came, and they also came with a hostage negotiator. So there would be times where Stefan would lock himself in the bathroom. He doesn't want to leave, and he's scared to leave. And they were very patient. They listened to us, and they had me go into the house with the hostage negotiator to get him to come out of the house safely and to bring him into the ambulance. After a few calls of them coming to the house, they started to become more aggressive towards Stefan. He was tased, and when he was tased, my family spoke to the police, and they, assured us that it was for his safety and the officer's safety, and they assured us that they were trained to handle situations like this.
So you trusted them.
Yes, we definitely trusted them for sure. My family's never dealt with anything like this before. We've never had to really have interactions with the police. My mother's an immigrant, so she thought that the American system would work for you if you do what you're supposed to do.
Right. So let's move into the actual night of the events. If we can start with, what was Stefan doing that prompted the phone call to the police?
That morning, they said that if Stefan does not go to school, if he refuses to go to school, which looking back is so crazy, if Stefan refuses to go to school, that we have to call the police. If he's a little agitated, doesn't want to go, we are supposed to call the police so he can be regulated back on his medication. That day, my father called the precinct, not the 911 number. He called the precinct directly. And he said, "Hey, I need help bringing my son to Streamwood." They responded and said, "Is this the house with the autistic teen?" My father said, "Yes." By the time the officers arrived, my father did not want them to come into the house. Stefan had calmed down. He said he was going to go, and we were fine. 6 squad cars showed up at the house for a non-emergency call. The officers came out of their vehicles, came to the door. My father met them at the door and said, "We do not need you here anymore. Stefan has calmed down. He's okay. I'm okay. We don't need you." They said for Stefan's safety, they have to see Stefan to make sure that he is okay.
Okay.
My father said, "Okay, only 2 of you can come into the home." He allowed 2 officers to come in who he recognized from previous times of them being at the house. He says, "Hey, Stefan, where are you? The police just want to talk to you. They just want to make sure you're okay." Stefan responds, "I'm downstairs, Dad." He walked down the stairs. My father leads him down the stairs. As the officers were coming down the stairs, one of them falls down the stairs. Stefan's coming around the corner, the hood on his head like this, his head down with a butter knife in his hand. The officer sees Stefan and shot him. The first time he shot him was on the side. The second officer at the top of the staircase, because Stefan was already going down, shot him in the back. And that is the shot that actually killed him.
This is a young man who could be anybody. This is a young man who was in his house being raised by a family who believed in the system, who believed in the supports especially the supports that this country has to offer individuals with disabilities and individuals with emotional health issues. And your father trusted them. Let's talk about the aftermath of, and what was the result of, because of course the legal system needed to respond. So what was the justice system's response to the situation after all was said and done?
The state police investigated, and they said that it was a justifiable homicide, that the officers feared for their lives.
Wow.
So they are still working for the police department. During that time, they harassed my mother. They would pull her over. The same officer that shot my brother would pull her over. Excuse me. And will just like look at her in the car, and then she would just go off because she's like, "What are you doing? You killed my son, and now you're pulling me over and harassing me." And she would report those things, so it's all documented, and nothing ever happened.
Nothing ever happened. So those are some of the issues that you had faced after your parents buried their child, after you buried your brother. So I understand that your family made some very strong steps towards advocacy, not just for your brother, but for all within your state.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Yes, we partnered with an organization called Access Living. They have a subgroup called AYOP. They helped us draft a amendment, which is the Community Emergency Services and Support Act. It is a mobile response unit for mental and behavioral emergencies. And we're hoping, we have a few senators that are on board right now. They are trying to put it with, now that there's so much talk about defunding the police, this is what we're trying to push for currently. So we've been working on it for years, and it seems like now it's actually gonna happen.
And I understand there is a way in which everyone on this panel and everybody listening can take action to support what your family has done.
Yes, on our website for Justice for Stefan, we have the one-liner there, and we're asking people in their communities to contact their senators, contact their state representatives, and ask them to support this bill.
Everyone within listening, viewing, will be able to take action to help support Stefan and to help support Matthew.
Yeah. This will also, help support those police officers that don't want to be at the scene to help with mental, crisis. If they don't want that, then we can send a trained professional to handle those situations. Someone who has gone to school for several years to de-escalate the situation. They will work directly with the police. So when someone calls 911 and it is flagged as someone with a physical or behavioral mental disability, this mobile crisis unit will respond. It also, for people who are interested in saving us taxpayers money, other cities that have adopted this has saved them a lot of money because it costs a lot of money for police officers, for ambulances, for all of these other people to do this work, when we can have the proper doctors do this work that can de-escalate it. 90% of these cases do not require a police presence.
They do not. They do not. De-escalation is a training that all mental health, behavioral health, and cognitive, we get this training yearly.
Yep.
It is required, and I can tell you from my experience, I have been able to go out into the community and de-escalate people when I'm by myself without putting a hand on them. The issue here is if you are dealing with a bias, if you are a police officer and approaching an individual and you're judging them first by the color of their skin, everything else is not going to matter to you. it's just not going to matter. So this first is about being Black, and then it's about being autistic. All the other behaviors that come along with autism are common across the board. Autism does not know color. Autism impacts everybody. And the things that come along with autism also don't know color. But our children, our Black children, when they walk out into the street with their beautiful, quirky, wonderful, talented selves, being on the spectrum, they are original, they are a gift. But when our Black children walk out onto the street, they're a threat. And their response, the response of our children, is something that can definitely end their lives, whether it be from incarceration or from losing their life.
11 years ago, I started the Color of Autism Foundation because I always had these questions. And when I was in a group, just support groups, and they were mostly of white individuals, and I would talk about what's going to happen when he's not seen as cute anymore. And they're like, oh, he'll always be cute. I go, no, what's going to happen when he's like a teenager and he's like 6 foot something and he doesn't understand what yield means, or he doesn't know his, he just doesn't know how to respond appropriately. And I think it's important to talk about this for a number of reasons. There's a lot of moms out there that are just horrified to send their children out into the world because they know that their child coming into this world Black is strike one. And then all of a sudden you have a doctor who's saying your child has, quote unquote, and I'm doing air quotes, a disability, depending on how you look at it. This is real. It's not just concocted in the minds of mothers. It's not concocted in the minds of Black people. Systemic racism is real. There was no reason that situation couldn't have been de-escalated by a mental health professional and not a policeman.
Exactly.
And parents, we really have to think long and hard about who we let into our homes, who we reach out to, because now it's gotten to the point where we basically have to interview the person we're reaching out to for help. Asking questions like, sir, are you a racist? I mean, things you don't think to do because it shouldn't be like this. So I can't stress enough, and I'm a little choked up because I just keep thinking about Renee. I've thought about Renee long and hard because Stefan is really just typical of what I've always unfortunately envisioned. And I'm so sorry that something that was in my mind is actually real.
When I watch Atypical, which and I'm so grateful to all of you. And one of my favorite episodes was when Sam had a meltdown on the bus. I felt so bad for him. And I was feeling it. I was feeling Sam's experience, thinking about my child. And as I watched him being hurt and disappointed and getting on that bus, and oh my dear God, I was feeling it. I was right there on the bus with him. But then he started to decompensate, understandably, anxiety. He was disappointed, he was hurt. And then he was trying to self-soothe and get himself out of this. And then it hit me. My child could not do what I'm watching Sam do. If my child did that, oh my God, he would have either ended up where Matthew is, or he would have ended up where Stefan is right now. Either way, I would have suffered an immense loss. And that my feeling is not isolated. This is a feeling of everybody dealing with a loved one of color who is on the spectrum. So I want you all to feel this and internalize this. We're talking about Black people, but this is a human thing. Every autistic life is a life. So there's no reason why Black autistic lives should not be afforded the same respect, protection, and consideration from our society. And that's all I have.
I'd just like to say from all of us at Atypical, thank you, the guests. Thank you to the Color of Autism Foundation for this incredibly moving conversation. It's really hope that we can all work together to make some much needed change. So thank you all so much.
Change is coming, as Matthew says. A change is coming, Mom. Sam Cook.
My dad would be so proud. He's so happy.
Renee, yeah, and I really do want to let us know this entire production is dedicated to Renee's dad.
Thank you.
Renee's dad passed away very recently, and Renee's carrying on this fight.
Yeah, she knew how important Stefan's story was to her dad. I mean, it's her family's story. And I'm just so proud of her. And I know she's probably tired of people saying she's strong, but you're strong, Renee. It's a lot that you endured through this. And I know your dad would be proud. And thank you again for being here. Thank you so much.